Seeing none. Administrator?
Your Worship, under presentations today, item 5.1 is the Canadian Women in Municipal Government Scholarship.
So thank you and welcome to Ali. Ali received a scholarship. It was $1,000, right? From the Canadian Federation of Municipalities. And Councillor Jameson and myself were there. We were so proud that, hey, here's our salmon arm young woman that's receiving this, and we were pretty excited. We were cheering to this whole full room, and they were like, "Wow, salmon arm is here." There's only two of us, but we did a good job. So we really we're very proud of you and all that you've done, and on receiving this scholarship. And I do have a presentation here for you, but I also want to recognize Gray because it's Simmons, right? Simmons. Sims. Anyway, really are very proud of you and that you will be attending UBCM with us. So that's pretty exciting for us to have you with us as well. Just like last year we had Ali. I think she learned a lot. It was probably a little overwhelmed sometimes last year as well. So I do have a certificate here. I don't know if Council, would you like to join me? What's that? Oh, yes, and Rhona Martin is here as well. UBCM wanted to make sure that we invited her to this because she is on the board. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. Sorry, FCM, that's right, yeah.
And it was very helpful. I was able to talk about your attendance at UBCM and how you were so involved. And I mean, they all got to see what you submitted, which was very good. And we had lots of conversation because there were some very, very good candidates. But as I was there with you at UBCM and got to sit with you a little bit when you were with your mentor, Mr. Lavery there, it was, I think it was helpful and it was exciting to be part of that. And know that, you know, you're not only coming from our province, but from our local regional district. And I think Salmon should be pretty proud, and I think your family is really proud of you. And we were cheering you on as well. So congratulations.
Yes, and I also have to recognize Graham as well. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this. We, you know, at City Council, having the Shadow Council and having the permission even to get these, invite these young people to the UBCM and to be able to sponsor them. I mean, it's like you are a big part of that, and so we really appreciate all that you are doing as well, and that School District 83 is doing. So thank you very much, Mr. Gom. So I actually have some councillors who would like to say a few things, and then we do have a presentation, and we'll ask you to come forward. And I think we did find a camera too, so we can take a picture, and so we can have this maybe in our annual report next year. So first, I'll start with Councillor Eliason.
Yeah, thanks, and congratulations. So it's well deserved. So the Salmon Arm Youth Council was modeled after the Clearwater Youth Council. Working at the the most recent past president before myself of the Southern Interior Local Government Association is by default always going to be Rhona. So I think she's been the past president of Silga 18 times now, which is you're never going to escape it ever. And so when I was president, we started this program where we wanted to welcome youth into the UBCM and into Silga, and we started involving them. And thanks to Councillor Lavery and to Mr. Gom for their work in helping to create the Salmon Arm Junior Council, because without their hard work and their cooperation, none of this would have happened. So Tim and Graham took the torch and really made it happen. At Silga, we put aside some funds because we had a little bit of extra money, and we decided that when other people are talking about succession planning and youth and getting involved, that it was really important that we foster that growth and we foster that. So I was successful this year because I'm also on the UBCM, which is Rhona's also a past president of getting funding renewed for the entrance fees for the students to attend. So all of the steps that have happened within this room have really set an example for what can be done with youth. And I'm excited to say that this year, in the first time, I believe ever, there will be a youth panel as a key presentation at UBCM. So it was through the work of SILGA and through the work of Salmon Arm and our youth council and that advocacy at the Union of British Columbia Municipalities that for the first time ever there will be a youth panel of youth governments at UBCM for all of us to attend. So I believe they're making me chair, and it's an afternoon session, which is a big change from my 7 a.m. shifts there. So thanks again to Tim and Graham and the Youth Council for all of your work to make us look good. And congratulations on your scholarship.
Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, thank you. I don't have much to add to Councillor Lyson's comments. He pretty much summarized all the people that deserve thanks, but I do want to thank Rona and have her pass it back to her board, because Ali had the exciting pleasure of going to UBCM last year. Gray gets it this year, and I don't think he would have got it if it was Salmon Arm City Council asking for it, because it would have been our second in a row so for the CSRD board to support Gray's application, I think made a difference. So pass that back to your board, please, on our behalf. And I can't reiterate enough, personally, 13 years here, that this program and the way it was brought about with a lot of work by a lot of people has been among the most rewarding things I've experienced here. So great to see the scholarship. I'm not sure how much Gray, who is my shadow, I'm his shadow. I'm not sure how much. I'm not sure how much I have to be responsible for him at UBCM, but I'm sure I will hear that in the very near future. But congratulations, Ali. It's great, and I look forward to showing Gray the ropes at UBCM as well.
Councillor Jameson?
Thanks, Your Worship. And if I'm not mistaken, it's Alexandra, isn't it? Yeah. So Allie, we've been calling her now for the past year, but Allie, in grade 8, you were well-spoken, and you were smart, and you were funny, and what else did I write? You were really good at word games, and you beat me more than once at bananagrams. And I'm looking at Mr. Gom, though, and I feel the same way he does right now, I think. Really proud of what you've accomplished, and now you're on your way to bigger things. And it's been a real pleasure to watch you mature and grow over this last 5 years. You're a real credit to your family and to Salmon Arms. So, Gray, big shoes to step into, okay? But I don't know you as well as Ali, but I know that you'll do a good job in the coming year, and it'll be great to see you at UBCM. And again, thanks to Councillor Lavery, Mr. Gom, and Mr. DeRosa, who stepped in for a few meetings as well. It's been a really good program, and we're seeing the fruits of your labor now, and your interest in politics and government and the civil service, and you're well on your way. Good luck in university this fall.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Cooper. Congratulations, Ali. This is so wonderful. Big shoes to follow, Graham. I'm sure you will do it. Congratulations to your folks, Ali, for the support that they've given. It's as young adults move on to the next stage in the chapters of their lives, and that's what's going on with you. It's a real testimony to the support you have from your family as well, so thanks to the folks. I mentioned it before, but one quick little story at UBCM and in terms of networking and stuff. And I said to Ali, well, you know, you're welcome to, because she was sitting with a number of us at different situations, and heading in, it was the address of the leader of the opposition, and I said, you're welcome. I'll be there. You're welcome to sit with me. And she says, no, I'm sitting up front actually, and here she is in the front row with members of the Liberal caucus attending their leader's speech to UBCM. I thought, man, you've passed me in networking already. Pretty impressive. I do also want, in terms of the thanks around, to recognize the role of staff in this pilot project, and in particular our Chief Administrative Officer and our Corporate Officer, who, while we get the ideas, while we put some work in, the coordination, the support, the direction of that has come from them as well. And so kudos to staff as well. This is just a successful, amazing pilot project, and the onus is on us now to do year 2 and do year 3, 4, and 5, and to keep this going, so that, as I mentioned, 5 years from now, we're not scratching our heads and saying, why did we do this anyhow? But it's, I think we've got the talent to make it sustainable and go on. Way to go, Ally.
Councillor Wallace-Richmond?
Thanks, Your Worship. Just to echo the congratulations of my fellow council, and to say that really government is about the collective impact you have. And here you haven't even gone to university yet, and you've had such an incredible collective impact, in addition to a fantastic resume with all of these accomplishments. So very proud of you, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you. Did you want to say something? Okay. All right, thank you. So we'd like to do a presentation. We could ask Rona to come up as well, and council members that want to join us. And we have a camera to take a picture, so. And it says Alexandra on this, just.
Thank you.
But I'd like to hang out with you guys too.
I just always feel like I have to get them there and get them. And who's gonna take them to early morning meetings? Because I won't.
I'm going over to Chattanooga now.
Okay.
And then
Hitchhiking back?
and coming back.
Okay. We'll talk.
Spend lots of time with you, I think.
Yeah. So your aunt told you
I'm already tired just thinking about roots and blues. What's that? I'm tired just thinking about roots and blues.
yeah, it's busy out there today.
Look, you can see the sun.
So we'll need to resume our council meeting, so. Thank you for coming in, Ally. Thank you to your parents and Graham and Greg. And Rona, thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Administrator?
Your Worship, the next item, 5.2, is Staff Sergeant Scott West with the quarterly policing report.
So welcome to council.
Mayor, councilors, finally we made it. And I don't know how I'm going to follow that up because that's pretty darn impressive. It's great to see that commitment from council and our staff here at the city to engage youth in such a way that can occur. That's great. As you know, I'm a sports coach, so anything that can come from that is going to be a good thing. I was going to mention, though, if she does seek a life in politics, that she doesn't forget the other civil servants that do the protecting and stuff. So, yeah. First, I'd like to start off by sending Sergeant LaChapelle's apologies for missing the last engagement date. He was preparing and went, oh dear. And then I get panicked emails on my cell phone that I subsequently pick up while I'm on vacation and go, oh dear, yeah, you're in trouble now. So much for the funding for that new police car you wanted. This quarterly report is for April through June 2018. So, and we have to back up the clock a little bit. And in looking at our numbers and our reports, our criminal code files were down for the quarter over 2017, which is remarkable given 2017 in that quarter was very good. We saw some substantial reductions. In large part, this trend followed a decrease in property crime. And by property crime, theft from motor vehicles and a few other key property crime types were down, albeit our calls for service stayed relatively the same between the 2 years. The city saw between April and June 1,275 or more calls for service, with 1,700 calls in total for the entire area of the detachment, which includes part of the CSRD. And that's all comparable with 2017. There's no amazing trends or earth-shattering changes in our crime picture in Salmon Arm at this point. On a staffing front, we filled a position that had been vacant for some time, constable transferring back down from the north. We were happy to engage Constable Jeremy Rands, with whom I've worked with in the past, from Northern Detachment, and he has family down in the Okanagan/Thompson/Salmon Arm area, which was good for him and a good fit for us so far. So that's been good. We've got another constable that's named to come here out of Williams Lake. His house is on the market, and he's actively marketing that. So if any of you guys want to move to Williams Lake and are looking for an acreage, I've got a house for you. We will, as I'm sure you are all aware, and we as lawmakers and law enforcers are all wrestling with the legislation pertaining to the legalization of marijuana or cannabis. We're no different in that. We've got a learning curve. We're going to see challenges in the policing universe as to how we apply new laws and how we apply existing laws and the new laws that will hit the books, especially as it pertains to driving, possession of marijuana, the quantities and the ages that you're allowed to possess it in. I've seen, as I've mentioned before, some of the preliminary legislation and some of the preliminary laws as it pertains to the provincial side of the house, with how you're going to be licensed, how these things are going to work. And I'm encouraged by a lot of that. And I think the provincial impaired driving laws will take a very dim view of high driving. I've seen recent papers where they include both the combination of high driving as well as impaired driving with alcohol. So those two things, the provincial level, they've identified that it's going to be an issue in the mixing of the two intoxicants. So I'm encouraged that they're taking steps at this point in time to provide us with some legislation and some direction with which way to go with some of these types of impaired driving investigations. As with any legislative change, we will see some challenges. We will see court challenges. We'll see an ebb and flow to some of the laws as it pertains to that, as they're challenged in the courts, I would envision. I have seen that in the past, so I don't think that this is going to follow any new model that way. It's going to be challenged as we go forward. And on the topic of driving, in the period between April and June, we had 30 collisions, which were either engaged people having to go to the hospital, so minor injuries to major injuries, as well as damage over 1,000. And those are the ones that I've kind of classified as major. I can pick those out. They're not just the fender bender in the parking lot or the fender bender wherever, where somebody maybe has some damage, doesn't report it to the police, they exchange particulars, or the damage is over, nobody gets hurt, and it's sent to us. So those are the ones that I've included as major, which is, for a city our size with the Trans-Canada running through the middle of it, pretty good, in my opinion, over a 3-month period. We're not a Vancouver, we're not a Kamloops, we're not a Kelowna, and I've worked in the Kelowna side of things and the Kamloops side of things and gone to 3 accidents at one intersection where everybody goes to the hospital in one day. So I think that's an encouraging statistic. And with that, I'll skip a few things and then come back to them. Our officers have written over 467 traffic tickets or notice and orders or warnings in that period, April to June. 23 high-risk driving charges were laid, so that'd be your intersection and your use of cell phones and distracted driving charges. 21 drivers were removed from local roadways for impaired operation of motor vehicles. And we had 10 or more traffic blitzes around the city and in the rural area during that quarter as well. I was part of that. We did one in the neighborhood of Shuswap and Highway 1. And in that case, we wrote more tickets for speeding than we did for lights. And we wrote a couple of distracted driving tickets, but that was 2 hours involving 3 members. And one of those members was paid for on overtime by your provincial government for their road safety initiative. So we're incorporating some of that funding into how we police here, at least on the Highway 1 corridor within the city of Salmon Arm. With the property crime, again, we're down from 2017. I will note, though, that I've seen the statistics for July. We're up just a little bit over previous years, and our actual call volume, criminal code cases, is up over last year, but within norms. It's not there's no red flags as of yet at this point. We've identified a issue on our border with one of our other detachments with which we're engaging them, and they're engaging us, and we're joining forces to take some action with respect to a specific criminal hotspot. So it's not that we think that one's going to be active for very long, but it will drive some statistics going through the summer as we partner with them to try and take care of an issue that's causing problems within the rural district as well as the city of Salmon Arm. And I have attached our quarterly report numbers, which for your reference. There's no astronomical changes. Our criminal code, property crime, as you can see, it's about third from the bottom on the first of the crime categories, is running a little higher or a little lower than it did within the city in quarter 2. I call it quarter 2. You call it quarter 2. It's my actual quarter 1. So excuse me if I get the two confused. And there is one thing of note, and that's something that we've discussed here at council before, and that's the mental health related calls, which are up slightly, and the files involving alcohol and drugs, which are probably up over 50%. And I don't know whether that's my officers actually coding things better or whether that's actually the case. I have spoken to a number of them, and it seems like intoxicants are causing a fairly large problem at this point in time with alcohol, fentanyl, marijuana, cocaine, those types of drugs. So in a nutshell, that's it for my report. I'm sure you probably have a couple questions, but like I said, it's tough to follow that.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, and thank you to your officers and for all the work that you do in keeping us safe. We really appreciate that. When you talk about the blitz and that you're also using provincial, the provincial component, we are thankful for that. That does. We're happy that you're doing it, and also that you're using some of the provincial, components of that. So we really appreciate the work that you're doing. We know that we're coming into a situation that we've never seen before when it comes to the legalization of cannabis. When you think of, we've never had in our lifetime seen an illegal substance become legal. So there's probably going to be a number of things that come up that maybe we hadn't even thought of. So I really appreciate your diligence on that and what you're doing and what you're looking at and trying to be ahead of the game. So I really want to make sure that we thank you for all that you're doing. And when it comes to the mental health related calls, it's just one of those very difficult things, right, to deal with. So we appreciate your due diligence on all of it. But thank you very much, and I will turn this over to Councillor Harrison. Had some comments to make. So.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Scott, for coming and seeing us again today. I really appreciate your report. I particularly appreciate the downtown foot patrols, and I've noticed them myself. And the fact that you're making an effort as much as possible to get out there. I know the community appreciates it. And it seems so hard sometimes to be proactive, but I think that's a really proactive thing that we can do. So it's great to see that. I just had wondering about Roots and Blues is coming this weekend, and I know we've always had a pretty well-behaved group that's come there. Any plans from your detachment regarding Roots and Blues?
Yes, we are augmenting our staffing levels, utilizing overtime for the Roots and Blues Festival. It does have a very good track record at this point in time. The organizer's done a great job at providing his safety plans and evacuation plans, and has taken a lot of steps as we go forward to mitigate any risks that we might have there. But it's a great event for the city. We recognize that, and we police it very visibly, which I think really helps in that. And the officers that step forward to take those overtime shifts are, by and large, very engaging with the public, which is both good for us, good for the event, and good for the attendees. So yeah, that's great.
I really appreciate that. I know the presence of the visual presence of your members at the Roots and Blues, and it's so non-threatening. They're there and talking with people and just being there. I think it's very helpful. Thanks very much.
Appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Councillor Flynn?
Yes, thank you for your report. Appreciate it. I did have a question. I'm glad to hear that you spoke of highway enforcement and catching people speeding at Shuswap and Trans-Canada, and it wasn't as much about red lights. Just a quick question, was it more semis or was it more cars that were speeding?
We didn't pull over one semi.
Okay, thanks. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, and it's related to the next item on our agenda, and also a letter we received and something I experience just about every day crossing the tracks. Those yellow painted lines that I don't understand how people don't know what they mean. But once again today I was waiting for a train, and once the train went by from the Narcisse crossing, everybody pulls up to the stop sign and everybody pulls up right behind them, including parking on the tracks. Is it RCMP that can enforce that? Because I think we need to ask you to start enforcing those yellow lines, because clearly people don't know what they mean. And it truly is. I waited. There was one car at the stop sign. There's only room for one car at the Narcisse crossing without parking on the yellow or on the tracks. I think we need to try to enforce that a bit in our community. I think people don't understand what the yellow means or want to ignore it, and I think they think once a train's gone by, they're safe to park wherever they want or stop wherever they want till the next train comes by, and hopefully it won't be in the next minute. But I think we need to enforce that a bit just to get the message out there. So I don't know if that is your responsibility or if it's CP's responsibility to enforce not stopping on those yellow lines.
I think that falls squarely in CP's railhouse.
Okay.
But it doesn't not fall in ours, to be very short. I'd have to look at the legislation, but if it's a prohibited area, then we would, as peace officers in the province of British Columbia, be able to write tickets on that. I guess by guess or by golly, we haven't had any major collisions in any of our level crossings here locally. I know that they are specifically problematic and can be, but that would be something that I would have to do some research on my traffic statistics in order to figure out what the applicable ticket would be.
From our council agenda today, there is a letter. We may be sending you a letter because of that. So I just wanted to kind of get a feel if that's CP or you guys. So thank you.
We're both enforcement agencies, so you could send it in both directions.
Okay, thank you.
There you go.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Cooper. Thanks, Scott, for the report. I just a general comment to start off with, and then one question on foot patrols. And I think at this table we really understand that each and every day police officers put their life on the lines on each shift that they do. And I guess if there's an opportunity through you to Fredericton and those services to pass on our condolences and our understanding here, I ask you to do that. Okay. And I fully recognize that is each and every shift for our members here in Salmon Arm as well. So I just wanted to note that.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
In terms of the foot patrol, and they were effective, and I managed to be down there sometimes to see them, and it was just great in terms of the engagement. I understand that this is a matter both of staffing availability and of budgeting as well. So just leaving the budgeting aside for a second, do you have the staffing capacity to have more regular presence on foot patrols over the summer season?
Well, I think with 23 that we've had, or 26 that we've had this summer, to my knowledge, that's unprecedented.
Yeah, no, I agree.
With respect to that. So I think that staffing availability, when we identify it as an issue or an initiative within the detachment, the members really have stepped up and listened. And I think that we can expect that to continue as we go forward. And to say that we don't have capacity to do that in some way, shape, or form, yes, we do. When we look at routine, regular foot patrols, is that going to be effective? And is that a good use of our time within the community, given the fact that we are looking at the railway tracks, we're looking at the highway, we're responding to calls for service? If they know we're going to be down there every day at 10 o'clock or every day at 1 o'clock or every day in the afternoon, then it might defeat the purpose of the foot patrol showing up around the corner unannounced with the person who's up to something, not knowing when we're going to be there. There's a positive and a negative to that too. And with that, if we have other enforcement officers that are down there on a regular basis and are seeing that could be viewed as helpful as well.
And my intent wasn't to imply that there wasn't the capacity there. I appreciate it, but I guess I'm thinking if there was a desire for an increased presence, not a regular shift presence, but an increased presence of foot patrol, would that be, is that an issue both of ongoing capacity as well as budget capacity? In other words, if we're going to make it 50 or 60 foot patrols, is that possible within the capacity that is existing there now?
Well, yeah, I think it is possible. Yes. Looking at the fact that we're from April to June, we've run 26 foot patrols. I think in the next quarter, between July, August, and September, that we'll probably be able to maintain close to that, if not be able to come close to it. So I think we'd probably be able to get somewhere close to that mark that you suggest. But it's sometimes not all about the volume. It's about the quality. And I think that the guys have done a good job at engaging the people that are sitting on the sidewalk that aren't otherwise supposed, that have a lawful reason to be there, but are otherwise doing things that may be potentially considered unlawful in the future, that they've done a good job at educating that, and they haven't turned a blind eye towards it. So for those particular individuals, it's become uncomfortable, which is the aim. And if they're not doing anything wrong, then they've got nothing to worry about.
And thank you for that. And I guess it was my sense of, again, projecting forward of it'd
Right.
be of the order of what we've seen already.
Yeah.
Ballpark-ish.
Yeah, if we wanted to do if we wanted to increase that any more than that, we'd probably have to look at, okay, what are our resourcing levels, and where are we going to go with that into the future in the way of a 5-year plan, which I'm gathering data on right now to bring our 5-year plan at the detachment up to date.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace Richmond?
Thanks, Your Worship. I really appreciate the foot patrols. I think it's good for people to see you.
Well, I appreciate. I'll send that feedback
Yeah.
back too.
Yes.
That's great.
Because we like to see you, and we need to feel comfortable, and it, peace officer is a critical part of the community. So I really appreciate that. I'd love to see them extended to maybe other hotspot locations, but maybe that'll be for another time to decide. I do have a question. Mm-hmm. So this evening we're having our public hearing on the public solicitation bylaw, also known as panhandling, or that seems to be the focus. So can you just clarify through Your Worship, only a RCMP or a municipal police force can enforce the Safe Streets Act, is that right?
Yeah, you have to be peace officer status.
I see, okay. So I think that was an important clarification for me to understand as we move through this process. Okay.
Right, because that is a provincial ticket.
Yes.
Not a municipal.
Not a municipal ticket,
Right.
yes.
So as a municipal bylaw, then a municipal bylaw officer would be able to enforce those municipal bylaws.
Yes, I see. Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anything further from council? Seeing none, then thank you so much for your report, and again, please pass on our thank yous to your constables and to your staff, even your front staff. I mean, everybody works together over there, so we appreciate all that you do. And as you've heard, the foot patrols have been mentioned by two councillors, so very much appreciated. So.
Thank you very much. Mayor, Council, thanks.
Administrator?
Your worship, the next item, 5.3, is Sue Kershaw regarding the railway crossing at Canoe Wharf.
Will you be advancing it?
So welcome to council.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. I hope by the end of this short presentation that you will agree with me that the 50th Street Northeast public grade crossing is actually an unsafe place for pedestrians all the time. This is a bird's eye view of the crossing. At the top it says Wharf Lane. That's what I call the little parking area at the south end of the wharf. The vehicle and pedestrian traffic on this grade crossing is significant. In terms of 75 Avenue Northeast, there are 30 houses along that street, and at least 23 of them are lived in year-round. Each house tends to have 2 vehicles, more in the summer, of course. Service vehicles regularly come and go. 75 Avenue Northeast is low in the city's snow removal list, which is understandable, so this grade crossing can be treacherous for both vehicles and pedestrians in icy and snowy times. Hopefully the crossing itself, not the street, will be moved higher up the list this coming winter. In recent years, a resident used her handicapped scooter to cross the tracks, and several times her wheels got stuck in the rail grooves. On one occasion, she even toppled over. I pushed my 102-year-old mom over the crossing from the bus stop to my house and have to turn her wheelchair backwards to avoid getting stuck. And strollers must encounter the same problem. In terms of the people who live in Canoe, across the tracks from us, in 2016, the population of Canoe was 1,081. Our postmistress estimates that 1,800 plus people live in Greater Canoe. Canoe Wharf is the center of many canoeligans activities year-round. Strolling, fishing, swimming, jumping off the railing, sunbathing, taking supplies to moored boats, diving for treasures. The launch ramp is used as much for swimming as it is for launching boats, kayaks, canoes, paddleboards, and personal watercraft. As well, many residents bring their dogs to the ramp for swimming. I think dogs use this ramp as much as boaters and swimmers. Children and teenagers are often at the wharf on their own with bikes and scooters. The 51 members of the Canoe Boat Club, plus their guests, regularly cross the tracks from late spring through fall. And a surprising number of dog owners trek along the beach in midwinter, as well as snowshoers and cross-country skiers. Lots of vehicles travel to and from Wharf Lane throughout the year, and the parking spills over onto both sides of 75 Avenue on many weekends during the summer. The pedestrian traffic is mixed. The basic issues from my point of view: this crossing is well traveled by both vehicles and pedestrians. However, there is no sidewalk to separate vehicles from pedestrians. The height of the tracks above the 2 intersections and the steep grades on the crossing itself definitely hinder the sight lines for both walkers and vehicles. This hampered visibility puts pedestrians at a seriously increased risk. There is an abrupt right turn from the stop sign on the northwest quadrant, that's on the 75 Avenue Northeast side, which further hinders the view of traffic coming up the other side. It is particularly treacherous in winter. And unfortunately, many crossing users exhibit a rather casual attitude to safety. Problem number 1, the grade crossing is quite rural. The crossing leads to a narrow road to the west and a country lane to the east. There is no yellow line down the center. There are railway warning lights and a bell, but no barrier gates, and none of the yellow lines that were mentioned earlier at Narcisse. And there is no sidewalk. The nominal shoulders are narrow, uneven, sloped, and or weedy. They certainly are not conducive to walking on. In the top left corner is the southwest quadrant looking from Canoe Beach Drive. The top third of it is fine. There's not as much weed there today as there was a month ago when I took the picture. The bottom 2/3, as you see, are weedy and it's sloped. To the top right is the southeast quadrant. There is a 2-foot stretch of gravel all the way up. The top falls off steeply, but it's barely passable. The bottom left is the northwest quadrant. The top 1/3 is fine. The bottom 2/3 is sloped, narrow, only 1 foot wide, and weedy. In fact, the weeds now come up to the 2/3 margin. And finally, the northeast quadrant on the bottom right, it's fine. It's at least 2 feet wide. The crossing barely accommodates 4 vehicles at any one time, especially since vehicles entering from the abrupt right turn in the northwest quadrant tend to drift out through their turning radius. It certainly is not unusual for pedestrians to have to share the crossing with 2 vehicles going in opposite directions, that is with both lanes full, and they're doing it without a sidewalk, and as you could see, minimal shoulder space. In November 2014, Transport Canada stipulated that all 14,000 existing public grade crossings across Canada be assessed according to specific requirements and remediated, if necessary, by November 2021. In regards to sightlines, crossing surface design, road and railway signs, crossing warning signs, and traffic signals timed with warning systems. However, Transport Canada's regulations regarding sightlines relate to the area that road authorities, railway companies, and private landowners must keep clear of anything that could block a road user's view of an oncoming train. That is, they do not address the issue of pedestrian and vehicle sightlines vis-a-vis each other. Problem 2, the crossing is higher than the adjacent intersections. This is definitely not a level crossing. The tracks are 1.5 meters or 5.1 feet above the 75th Avenue intersection. I'm 5'5", so that means that the tracks are just almost my height. And 0.76 meters or 2.5 feet above the Canoe Beach Drive intersection. Both these heights impede sight lines for vehicles and pedestrians traveling north and south. In the left picture, a person my height, standing at the bottom of the crossing on the 75 Avenue side, can't see the first 2 blocks of 50 Street Northeast. You can only see the upper half of the hill in the 3rd block. In the right picture, from the bottom of the crossing on Canoe Beach Drive, I can't see any of Wharf Lane. As this woman crosses over from Canoe Beach Drive, she almost disappears from sight. The same woman disappears more completely as she walks from the 75 Avenue side. Here are 3 views, or the lack thereof, of vehicles on Canoe Beach Drive in the intersection from the 75 Avenue side. There's a transit bus on the left and 2 trucks on the middle and right. Problem 3, this grade crossing is steep. The road grade on the south side from Canoe Beach is 8%, and the road grade on the north side is 11%. A good comparison is the Trans-Canada Tank Hill. At the top, truckers are warned of the 7% grade, which is less steep than either side of the 50th Street Northeast grade crossing. At one point in the crossing, drivers usually encounter a blind spot. It's the result of their rigid frames angling upwards as they move up the steep slope. the little white dot in front of the green tree on the right is my husband's head and hat. Now, I admit I didn't keep the camera exactly level, but I was worrying about driving as well. But you'll get the point that as I reach the top, I now lose view of the intersection and the people who might have been there. And as you can imagine, it's even more blinded. Did I do something? It's even more blinded as you go up from up the steeper 75 Avenue northeast side. Oh, okay, there. Problem 4. The stop signs in the northeast and northwest quadrants further compromise safety. The stop sign in the northeast quadrant is set somewhat back from the crossing itself, so drivers proceed a few feet before they make the turn up and over the tracks. However, they must venture across the blinded sight lines of vehicles and pedestrians on the other side of this high and steep grade crossing before they get into the lane on the right side of the slope. They often execute a lazy curve getting there, and they experience the blind spot near the top. The stop sign at the northwest corner poses an even more significant problem. Vehicles must stop at the bottom of the slope, immediately make a sharp right turn, accelerate up the 11% grade, and hopefully stay to the right in case an uncertain person or vehicle is coming up the slope from the Canoe Beach side. At the start of the turn, drivers are likely more focused on their driving and less on watching for any pedestrians on the right side. Then, as the vehicle reaches the tracks, the driver experiences that blind spot caused by the 11% slope. This right-hand turn is particularly problematic in the winter when ice or snow covers much of the turn onto the steep crossing. Where can a pedestrian walk under these conditions? Additional problems for pedestrians. Far too many hotshot drivers like to see how much air they can capture crossing the tracks with little regard for pedestrians or vehicles coming up the other side. And despite the poor visibility, too many pedestrians amble across. The city paid about $30,000 to put a sidewalk across the tracks at Narcisse Street to accommodate pedestrian traffic. While there is more vehicle traffic at the Narcisse crossing, there is likely much more pedestrian traffic at the 50th Street Northeast crossing. In summary, pedestrians are at significant risk as they traverse this high and steep grade crossing without a sidewalk. They can disappear from a vehicle's view or not even appear in a timely fashion. Their own sight lines, especially the sight lines of little people, are hampered by the heights and the slopes of this crossing, and there is no sidewalk to demark their travel route and to safely separate them from vehicles. So surely the dangers posed to pedestrians, young and old, at the 50th Street Northeast crossing easily justify the spending of money on an extension of the 50th Street Northeast sidewalk across the CPR grade crossing. I urge all of you to approve such an expenditure.
Thank you. You did, this is a great presentation.
Thank you.
You've shown it from every angle. You've shown us exactly as you see it. And I'm very impressed and concerned.
Thank
so
you.
I'm very thankful for your presentation. When they did the review of the crossings, I just want to ask Director of Engineering what they had to say about the Canoe Wharf crossing.
Your Worship, the assessment was done in 2017 and completed in January 2018. It was based on the design elements of the crossing, and so it was based on Transport Canada's recommendations and limits for the design. And essentially the recommendations that were required or suggested to the city were some warning signs, some line paint markings, some stop lines, and that was about it.
But no sidewalks.
No, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you so much for that. But you make some really good points. I actually just walked over there the other day, and I had concerns about the young people that were jumping off the top of the wharf.
Off the top of the,
Yeah, climbing up the railing and jumping off the top and doing flips, and it looked like a lot of fun.
well, it happens at least 200 times a day in the summer.
There you go. So those youth are also walking up back and forth
Yes.
across that crossing, and so I appreciate everything that you have to say. And
Thank you.
I will open up to council, but I think you've made a very clear and good presentation and a good reason for sidewalks there.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, and Councillor Jameson, I have you first.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. That was a really great presentation.
Thank you.
And it's well researched, and I'm impressed that you had winter photos and summer photos and everything else. So thank you very much for bringing a lot of this to our attention. And as soon as you started speaking, I started writing down notes thinking about the improvements we had made at Narcisse probably 2 to 3 years ago. And I'm glad that you referenced that near the end of your presentation. So the very first thing I'd like to do, though, is to make sure that your concerns are sent to Traffic Safety Committee. I think and they can have a good look at it and report back to council. But I think that maybe we're obviously going to have a discussion here today. I think it's you brought forward some concerns that I think we all share in varying degrees. So maybe I'm going to ask some of our staff some questions, and I'm hoping that we can have a map. Do we have a map, an ortho of that, through Your Worship? Mr. Neuenhausen, do we have a map that would show us that?
There's
area
actually
well?
one on Sue's presentation.
If we can go to the second,
Very first one, I guess.
it's the second one,
Okay.
there.
Make sure that, okay, good. Well, I was hoping for something a little bit. Oh, can we zoom in on that a bit? My eyes aren't as good as they once were. Not that they ever were good, but. Well, that we'll work with that. Okay, so just so that I'm clear on your request, Sue, what would you suggest then for the sidewalks there?
Well, you can
You're
see,
looking at all four corners?
no, the best I can hope for is an extension of the one that Mr. Eliason just pointed, just coming across.
Okay.
That right now is the logical thing to do, but those two quadrants are the worst in terms of pedestrian, any walking on what might be called a shoulder.
Yeah, I would agree on it's the northwest quadrant there.
Yes.
That's where the pole was with the bent sign?
Yes, I'm glad you noticed the bent sign.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
And so your suggestion is that we need that sidewalk
All the way across.
right across on a single side. Are you suggesting that we need sidewalks on the Wharf Lane at all?
On Wharf Lane? No,
Okay.
no. It is the logical side to put the sidewalk on because an extension. I feel so strongly that we need a sidewalk that's kind of calls out to everybody. This is where we want you to walk. You know, especially to the kids. I would hope that the parents in Canoe would be saying, now you walk on that sidewalk. I see you off the sidewalk and you won't be going there.
Okay.
There are so many blind spots as people cross.
Okay, thanks, Sue. So back to, through your worship, back to Mr. Neuenhausen. So when we worked on Narcisse, that's about 3 years ago, something like that, I think, was when most of the work was done?
Yes, Your Worship. It was a dragged out project because of the coordination with CP Rail, and there was $20,000 for the concrete crossing component of the rails, and then $36,000 for the construction of the sidewalks.
Okay, and again, through your worship, how does that compare to this crossing, especially on the right where the tracks cross the road?
Your Worship, it would be very similar because you would need to have CP Rail install the concrete pads over the rails for the sidewalk, and then you would have to extend the sidewalk from the lane to 50th. So very similar costs, about $56,000 or $60,000.
Okay, was there any cost sharing, Your Worship, with CP on that?
No, Your Worship,
was
it was
our-
at the city. All the railroad crossings are the city's crossings. They aren't the CP's crossing.
Okay. And probably one last question, Your Worship. So in that assessment that we carried out that was finished earlier this year, was there an acknowledgement of some of the problems that have been presented today, or?
Your Worship, there was some acknowledgement of the grades approaching the crossing from either side. There's no warrant for gates because of the speeds and because of the amount of trains that cross. So essentially, the limits of the works required or recommended were signage and some line painting.
Okay, okay. Well, you've pointed out some, in my opinion, some obvious problems. Okay,
Thank
so we might not come up with solutions today, but I think there's a budget discussion here that has to take place, and that would, of course, come in later this fall. But thank you so much for your presentation. Your 2 and 3 and 4 views of the same as cars move, I think is really useful, and laying it all out in the quadrants for us like you have. You've done a really admirable job. I appreciate your input, and I want to make sure that it goes to the traffic safety. They all talk about it, and I also would like to see a discussion happen about sidewalks and some improvements there. And if it means a discussion at budget time, I think we need to have that.
So you'd like that at budget time?
Yeah.
We want to make sure that. Okay, so.
Thank you.
Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sue. And I think Ken really covered it well with his talk. It's nice when local people, you obviously walk across there all the time, come and share with us because we can't know every intersection. So thank you very much. And I agree, traffic and safety, I think we send it there. And then as a specific referral at budget time, if we take this PowerPoint and make sure that goes with the package, it's probably about a $60,000 budget item. I don't think any of us would argue with you that it's something that we need to do. So it's just a matter of, can we afford to do it? And in comparison to the other items that come up with budget. So thanks very much.
May I respond?
Yeah, you can respond through me.
Through you.
Yes.
Through you. $60,000. That's a lot of money. And I do support the Ross Street underpass, and it's going to cost a lot. Listening to what's been said, and my husband said, don't give them any other ideas, but is there any possibility that instead of a concrete sidewalk and everything, as a first step, and of course you'd have to do this before you put in a sidewalk anyway, could we have a 3-foot real shoulder put across the tracks?
Director of Engineering?
Your Worship, we can provide that at specific referral, some different cost options.
Okay.
And the second thing I'd like to also comment, I noted in 2 documents that I read about railroad crossings, and there's something that says available funding for grade crossings. Transport Canada can provide funding for eligible costs related to a grade crossing improvement project, and then it lists a website. So I was holding on to that as a carrot to offer you.
Well, thank you very much, and we can look into that, Director of Engineering.
Your Worship, those grants are only applicable to the recommendations coming from the reports that are being submitted to Transport Canada. So they would be based on the recommendations coming from the report. So unfortunately, the sidewalk would not be considered as one of those improvements.
We appreciate any help that you can give us.
Thank you.
And as I think was been noted by the councillors, it's very good when someone like yourself comes forward with such a great presentation, because obviously we can't be everywhere, but so when you report to us, that we really appreciate it.
And I have the signatures of many of the people who live along 75 Avenue, and I did leave it for a few days at the Canoe Village Market, but the important word, I asked that we, the undersigned, use the crossing on a regular basis. So I ask people to only sign if they use it on a regular basis. So may I approach you?
Please. And thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And so I have some other councillors that would like to speak. Did you have anything further, Councillor Harris?
Thank you.
Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, I don't think you need to stay there and stand while I speak, so if you want to sit down, I'm fine. I'm not asking a question, I just have some comments. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation, one of the best I've seen here, most well-prepared. Great pictures, great angles, different seasons. I think the only thing is I thought the staff sergeant had left, but I think he now can ticket you for using your mobile use device in your car. But he's still here, so I'll let him deal with that. No, in all seriousness, great presentation. I was just going to say let's refer it to budget. Staff's already talked about options at budget too, if we can't do it all. You talked about it. I think it's really good. It's going to traffic and safety. I don't know that they'll say anything except it's not that safe, and support us finding ways to make it improved. The last comment I would make is that if it's going to traffic and safety, one of my biggest pet peeves is, and I know this has been brought up before, but every one of our level grade crossings has a four-way stop. Most people think the stop sign should be on the opposite side of where it is. And I would just like that reviewed one more time. If we're referring the intersection to traffic and safety, it's confusing to me, and it's confusing to others. And I will say that my son, when he first got his license at 17 and worked at the mill, he made a huge mistake and got in a fender bender because he didn't realize where the stop sign was. Not trying to take away the responsibility from him, but I think we should review that at the same time. And I know it's been reviewed a number of times, so I just would ask one more time to put that there with everything else. And again, thank you for your presentation. That is my dog launch as well. That's where my dog loves to go swimming, is on that boat launch. So I see how much it's used. So thank you.
Okay. Councillor Eliason?
Thanks. I've been over these tracks. I've never jumped my car, but it's a good idea, and I look forward to doing it later today. So what time? Like 6 o'clock? We're good. No, I too share your concerns about the intersection, and I feel like the Canoeligans have figured it out. There's lots of need for sidewalks in Canoe. It's, in fact, I would say Salmon Arm's most walkable and bikeable community. It's flat, and it's great, and so people do use it. And so we've always tried to provide methods of transportation that would get people off of Canoe Beach Drive, because we can't afford to build that. But we do have a comprehensive design for the sidewalk from the Hive to the ballpark when the development happens. So we have been proactive in that respect. I would support something like this in budget, but I don't know if we're going to get the kids to use it. That's the thing. There's a crosswalk. There's 3 crosswalks there, and I don't remember the last time I saw one of them used properly. And I'm there every day. So we can build it, but whether or not it gets used or not is another question. As far as Councillor Flynn's comments about the changing of the stop signs, I 100% disagree with you, Councillor Flynn, because you're wrong. Just like normal. No, but the stop signs were put that way, I believe, for the boat traffic, because if there's a stop sign on the side coming out of the wharf, and you have to stop on the tracks, which you say is in the wrong place, but there isn't one going directly from north to south, and you have to stop there at the bottom of the hill, your boat would be stuck on the top of the tracks. Probably a bad place for a boat to be stopped. So I agree the stop signs are a concern, and maybe we can make them bigger, brighter, or better, but to change that intersection at this point, I think is would be dangerous itself, because if you're pulling your boat out from the lake when it's clear, you don't want to have to stop at the bottom of that side. So maybe a 3-way, but not a 4-way. So I agree. We'll look at this at budget time and traffic and safety and see what we can do. But no ATR stops. No stopping to the stop signs, Councillor Flynn.
Councillor Walsh-Richmond?
Thanks, Your Worship. Thank you to my neighbor. for this very detailed presentation. I agree with Councillor Lyson. I think if this were to happen, I'm glad to see it referred to traffic and safety and the budget process. There would have to be an education campaign because the truth is those kids use that road like it is one big sidewalk. I even use that road like it is one big sidewalk. I admit it. So part of it is volume and part of it is habit. But Canoe is growing, and I think that's part of what we're seeing. So it would certainly, if it were done, we would certainly have to work hard to make sure that people understood this is the way we're going to do this now. So thanks again.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jameson for a second time.
Yeah, it's a question through your worship. Mr. Newhausen, the Narcisse crossing, was there any change in the grade when we did improvements there?
Director of Engineering.
No, your worship, there was no change in the grades.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can you just bring the map up just one more time that we had up there that showed the crossing? There. So one of the things I noticed too, and I saw in some of your pictures too, was also parking. And that's one of the things that I noticed when I went down there that day and saw the youth jumping off the top of the wharf, was the parking. Because everybody was parking in that upper part, trying to go across there and park. Some people were backing around, coming back and parking in here. So they're trying to park over there when there's no parking. And so I can see that was also an issue that you brought forward as well. And we actually did the same thing. We drove across there. Oops, there's no parking. Kind of had to back around and get out and come back and park over on this side. So there has to be, I agree with that particular issue also, because it was just like people parked everywhere. And a truck trying to back in and take to unload his boat. So there are some things that we really need to look at. And so I really, again, appreciate your presentation. And we will be sending it to traffic safety. And once we hear from them, we'll also, looks like we will be referring it to the 2019 budget. And so you've even given us another carrot. Anyway, so thank you so much for your presentation. Administrator?
Your worship, under confirmation of minutes, item 6.1 is the regular council minutes of July 23rd. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, seconded by Councillor Harrison, that the regular council meeting minutes of July 23rd, 2018 be adopted as circulated.
Okay. Do we have any comments or questions on the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
And under committee reports, item 7.1 is the Development and Planning Services Committee meeting minutes of August 7th. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Jameson, seconded by Councillor Flynn, that the Development and Planning Services Committee meeting minutes of August 7, 2018 be received as information.
Do we have any comments or questions on these minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
And item 7.2, your worship, is the Social Impact Advisory Committee minutes of July 10. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, seconded by Councillor Eliason, that the Social Impact Advisory Committee meeting minutes of July 10, 2018 be received as information.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace-Richmond?
Thanks, Your Worship. I'd just like to draw your attention to item 5B regarding the street solicitation bylaw, which has been discussed several times at Social Impact. There's a number of motions to bring to your attention. The first would be that the Social Impact Committee recommends to Council that a letter be sent to BC Housing detailing the need for an outreach worker in Salmon Arm. The Shuswap is the only region that doesn't have an homeless outreach worker through the BC Housing program. And the second is that the committee doesn't support the bylaw as presented, especially relating to the fines, and they want this issue addressed in a more compassionate approach. So I just make reference to those and keep them in mind as we go into the public hearing portion of the bylaw this evening.
Is there? So do we need a motion for the first part?
I think that would be important, Your Worship, to have that motion. And we've also asked for a meeting at UBCM, I believe. So,
okay.
I think.
So we need a mover. Councillor Flynn?
Your worship, there is a motion on the floor already, which is to adopt the minutes.
Right, okay. So we'll do that and then we'll make a motion for this. Okay, so for the minutes, so call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Councillor Wallace Richmond, you wanted to make a motion as pertained in the minutes?
Yeah, item 5B from these minutes.
Okay, second by Councillor Flynn. Anyone wish to speak to the minutes or to that motion? Councillor Harrison?
Thank you, Worship, and I'm not sure if Councillor Wallace Richmond knows the answer to this, but I'm just wondering about the funding of a position like that. Is in cities where there is outreach workers, is there a city responsibility to help fund that in any way?
Through your worship, my understanding is there is not. It is strictly BC Housing.
Okay, so we'll be lobbying them and including that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, speaking in support of the motion, perhaps sharing our statistics that the staff sergeant just provided, and perhaps some input from him with regards to mental health files would be helpful in our letter as well.
Good advice.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Is there anything further? Okay. Hearing none, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
Your worship, item 7.3 is the Housing Task Force meeting minutes of July 16. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Lavery, seconded by Councillor Wallace Richmond, that the Housing Task Force meeting minutes of July 16, 2018 be received as information.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any comments from Councillor Lavery or Councillor Wallace Richmond? It's pretty, it's fairly clear here anyway. Just so, do we have any comments from anyone else? I just think there's some under new business, some of the updates from Paige Hilland and Don Dunlop from CMHA and Lana Pitt. They were all good information, so I appreciate that. Thank you. So then I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
Your worship, the next item, 7.4, is the Shuswap Regional Airport meeting minutes of March 14. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Harrison, seconded by Councillor Eliason, that the Shuswap Regional Airport Operations Committee meeting minutes of March 14, 2018 be received as information.
Okay. Do we have any comments or questions from council? Seeing none, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
And item 7.5 is the Downtown Parking Commission minutes of June 26. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Eliason, seconded by Councillor Flynn, that the Downtown Parking Commission meeting minutes of June 26, 2018 be received as information.
Do we have any comments or questions? Okay. Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
And your worship, under introduction of bylaws, item 8.1 is City of Salmon Arm Council Procedure Bylaw number 4276. And after an introduction by staff, we would be looking for a motion to give that bylaw for second and third reading.
Thank you. Corporate Officer?
Thank you, Your Worship. The community charter requires that council, through a bylaw, establish procedures for council and committee meetings. And currently, bylaw number 3331 does that. However, due to the fact that the legislation has changed with respect to the date of the general local election, now the need has arisen to change the date from the first Monday in December to the first Monday in November. So that's what sort of created the review process that was undertaken with respect to the current procedure bylaw. And it was found that it was an opportune time to make a few other changes, namely update all references of district to city, update the addition of Robert's Rules of Order to also include subsequent releases, add Columbia Shuswap Regional District update to the order of proceedings and business section of the agenda, remove all reference to Committee of the Whole, update Local Government Act sections, add electronic meetings, add notice of motion, renumber sections and reformat where applicable, and of course change the inaugural meeting to the first Monday in November following a general local election.
So thank you for all of that and for all of your updates. And I know that it was that new date for the election that really kind of triggered the review of this, because the first meeting has to be a month earlier. And also for the addition of electronic participation in meetings. I think there are times when that can also be very helpful. So I thank you for that. Councillor Flynn, you had some comments?
Just a question related to the issue you just brought up, adding the electronic meetings. Is there any rules around that? Is there any part that says if we don't have quorum, we can get quorum, or you can actually attend meetings electronically if you choose to do so? And it's very flexible. And if that is the case, is there still a rule on how often you can not be in attendance in person? Because what I don't want to see is somebody who's gone 6 months and attends every meeting electronically.
Through your worship, the intention of electronic meeting participation would be only in circumstances when you can't physically be in attendance. So the expectation would still be that you'd primarily attend in person. But if, for example, you just, you had a meeting to attend outside of the community and couldn't make it, for extenuating circumstances, and it is to a maximum of 2 electronic participants. We only have 2 lines available, so all of council couldn't just decide to stay home in pajamas and participate.
We're gonna put those kind of parameters around it, I don't know. No, okay, I just wanted to understand, I think it's long overdue, and I think it's more important at this table than at the CSRD, because the CSRD, we all have alternates, but here we don't have any alternates. So I think that's a very important addition as long as we manage it properly, that's all.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Councillor Jameson?
Thanks, Your Worship. That was a good question, and it was answered, some of the question I had. And I had a question about committees, Your Worship. I just want to make sure that I'm clear. So a standing committee versus a select committee. A standing committee would be something like Agriculture Advisory Committee, and a select committee would be the Housing Task Force. Is that something that has a standing committee has no end unless council chooses to end it, and a select committee would have a definite beginning and end period? Yeah.
Through your worship, yes, the Housing Task Force could become a standing committee if that's the choice of council, but at the current moment there is sort of the feeling of an end.
Okay, so they would be considered a select committee then. Okay, good. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Eliason?
Yeah, I noticed that the presentations were limited to 5 minutes, and I appreciate that, considering we had 3 and it took us an hour.
Thank you. Is there anything further?
So we're looking for a motion, Your Worship,
Okay.
to give it for
By
second and
Councillor
third
Flynn
readings.
And Councillor Lavery? Okay. Anyone wish to speak to the motion? Hearing none, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
And Your Worship, that brings us to correspondence.
Okay. Councillor Eliason?
Yeah, if we can bring up housing stats, number 1. As you can see, we're on track for another record year potentially here in Salmon Arm with over 80 new houses, or 79 new houses with the other additions. Salmon Arm and the building department are doing their best to help ease our housing shortage in Salmon Arm, and it's adding great things to our community. You've noticed across the country there's been building booms and housing shortages and homelessness, and so I believe in 2016 we built about 85 new houses. In 2017 altogether we built, I think, 115 or 120 new houses. And then in 2018 year to date, we're close to 80 single-family dwellings. That doesn't include the 27 multifamily units or the additions or the basement suites, along with the legal suites. So this is great to see, A, for our economy, and B, for the growth of our community. When you can add, in 3 years, 300 homes, that means 300 families, or in some cases, 450 places for people to live. So it's good to see. It's good to see Salmon Arm growing, and these are the single-family dwellings, and the additions and the renovations are really the ones that have the greatest economic impact in our community. So good to see, and kudos to staff for making that happen.
Okay, thank you. Anything further that council would like to look at? Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Worship. Since my name is referenced in letter 6, and I believe the writer of the email is here, is Don Gray here?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Right in front.
I want to address that, and I do want to make it clear that you reference my name, and that's because I'm the Downtown Salmon Arm representative on the board, and this request came through Downtown Salmon Arm, even though that's not their jurisdiction, to set up something on the wharf. And I brought that to council, and council made it quite clear that there wasn't enough information about how this would be managed, who would manage it, who would choose performers. And so there was a request from all of council for more information. You have provided some more information, which I appreciate. I do want to make it very clear, though, that the Marine Peace Park and the wharf, in the past, all councils haven't been supportive of doing very many commercial ventures there. Now, Wednesdays on the wharf is clearly an exception. I applaud you for wanting to get more people on the wharf. I moor a boat there. I'm down there quite a bit walking a dog. And I think it is one of our biggest assets. And to have more activity and more things for people to do there, I think would be a good thing. I don't think we are ready to have something for this summer. And I think if we were going to try to do something more, which is what you're asking for, and I think it's a great idea because I love music too, but I think it's too late for this summer. I think we need to know more well before next summer, and the new council will have to decide if it's something they are in favor of. I think the intent is great, and it's more about the execution. But I have also heard from people that say the last thing we want is something more that bothers birders and too much noise. So I think there's some work to be done. I appreciate your additional information. I just wanted to make it clear it wasn't me specifically requesting it. I wasn't sure what I was presenting to council, so I didn't do you any favors in my presentation because I didn't know enough about what you were trying to do. I'm not sure if council wants to hear from Don today, because we all have to agree to that, or if we want to work on getting some more information and aim for next council next year.
So all of council would have to agree, and I'm hearing that some of them don't want to hear from him today, like yourself, but would you look at it for next summer?
And Don, I just want to say from my point of view, I'm in a bit of a tough position because it was the DSA, Downtown Salmon Arm, and I'm on their board, that asked me to bring it to council. I never got a chance to meet with you. I should meet with you if it's going to be pursued, but it's not even really Downtown Salmon Arms. And I'm kind of still at a loss as to who should approach council with this, whether it should be the Arts Council, whether it should be Downtown Salmon Arm, whether it should be yourself as a person who wants to make the wharf different. I think we need to figure that out too in jurisdiction. So we've got a lot that we have to sort out, but I will commit to working with you over the next month to figuring out exactly what you want to do and how we can maybe look at pursuing it.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. Did anyone else want to speak to this this particular letter? Councillor Harrison? No. Okay, Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Don, for coming today and for your letter in response to Councillor Flynn. I guess I never like to lead somebody on, and I'm one who really enjoys the natural part of the wharf, especially the wharf piece as it is now. So I wouldn't support music being played out on the wharf area. The Wednesdays on the wharf in the Peace Park, which happens every Wednesday, I think is fantastic. And I think it would be great to have more things happening there in that grass area. But for me, just so you know, I wouldn't support having music out on the end of the wharf.
Okay. Thank you. Did anyone else want to speak to this particular one? Okay. Alrighty. So, Councillor Wallace, so thank you for your presentation. You've heard from Councillor Flynn, and you've also heard from Councillor Harrison as well, and so we've got some things to consider, but and we'll see how you do with Councillor Flynn. But thank you for bringing it up, Don. We appreciate that. And Councillor Wallace Richmond?
Your Worship, could we go back to the building department? I was a bit slow on the buzzer there.
All right.
So, line 5, MFD's multifamily development, I guess is what that means. So, last year at this time, we had $1 million in development in multifamily, and this year we have 4.7 million. Is that true? That's a pretty significant increase. So and when you say 8 parentheses 22, it's 8 buildings representing 27 additional units? That's correct. That's quite something. So the market is also responding. We dance with the public-private dance, so I'm very delighted to see this particular stat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you have anything further, Councillor Wallace Richmond, that you would like to look at?
No, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you. Item, while Don is here, and it's kind of related, item 11, from Nikki Mann with regards to the wonderful Wednesday on the Wharf. For the first time ever, my company decided to sponsor Wednesday on the Wharf. And it happened to be Wednesday, August 1st, where we had a 10-minute rainstorm followed by beautiful sunshine. And I really appreciate this person. I did not prompt this, writing this letter. I don't know Nikki Mann, but what a wonderfully written letter. All seriousness aside, or all seriousness, as a sponsor who spent good dollars trying to support this event, to have it have to be canceled because of a 10-minute shower that really was gone, but water impacted the electrical pieces of equipment. When we have to err on the side of safety, it was truly disappointing as the sponsor, and it was truly disappointing for the people that were there. I know there's been talk in the past, and I guess what I would ask is that once again we refer to the budget process, looking at some ways to perhaps somewhat rainproof the gazebo that I don't think will have to cost a lot, and I think downtown Salmon, maybe the Arts Council has looked at it. But I think it should be a priority. Wednesdays on the Wharf is something we all point to as a highlight. I don't think it would take a lot to make that better, and perhaps making the gazebo better and having it available for drop-in artists can add to the waterfront, and it's not on the wharf that some people have spoken to. So I think it could be a win-win-win. And the nice news is the Wednesdays on the Wharf has allowed me to carry forward my sponsorship to next year. They've dealt with it the only way they could, but it was disappointing, and I think we do need to look at if we can make some improvements. So I would like to refer this to staff, and perhaps I'll have a discussion with them as to where we can go with it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Larson?
Yeah, when Channel Liason Mortgage Broker sponsors that event, it never rains, Councillor Flynn. So you should always go to that one. Touche. I think this is an important issue. District Arts Council's brought it forward to us several times, and I think that this needs to be rectified in the 2019 budget. So I'll support your referral, but I would direct staff to come forward with some options for us, because I think it's important that we deal with this asset and make it usable so that Salmon Arm Financial finally gets their day in the sun.
Okay. Councillor Wallace Richmond, you would just speak to this one?
Yes, just also remind council that the Monday evening Rotary group is also considering putting together an application to help fund this repair. Tuesday evening, I apologize. Shuswap Rotary.
Yeah. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So I agree, it would be nice to have that more rainproof. We've applied for grants several times, have we not? Can we just ask staff how that's gone and if perhaps there's another opportunity?
Your Worship, the city actually hasn't applied, but they've basically supported an application from the Rotary. And this has come to budget on several occasions.
That's not a current application, is it? That's one that's passed and we were unsuccessful.
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship. There has been nothing since then. That's about 2 years ago.
Okay, because I think this is an Expo 86 building, isn't it? The gazebo. I believe it came from Vancouver Expo 86. So I would ask, I'm sure staff will look for opportunity, but perhaps there is a way to get some joint funding through, especially if it's a second time application. Sometimes we're successful a second time. If coming to budget and looking at some type of grant application might be helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison, or sorry, Councillor Jameson.
I think Premier Van der Zam opened the wharf and the gazebo when he was in town in 1986 or 87. So I'm just wondering, he's not our premier anymore, but I'm wondering if he could help out. That was a good grand opening, I remember it.
There you go. Councillor Lavery.
Actually, it's on a different.
That's okay, we
item,
can move on.
Okay, so I think in the correspondence, there are a number of issues, I think, or a number of requests that require our approval, and maybe just to go through those. So if we could have item number 5 to start off with. And a request to put up posters coming from staff in response to Columbia Shuswap Invasive Species Society, and I would move that we grant that.
Okay. And seconded by Councillor Eliason. Anyone wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Jameson?
I know that Sabnus has been quick off the mark, and I think they're up on the foreshore now, so that's good. Yeah.
Okay.
The notices or
The posters, yeah, the bullfrogs. We're hoping they're not there, not in great numbers anyway, but I know there's posters up, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thank you very much. Item number 14, which is if we could have it up.
We had a motion on the floor there, though, to support, so we need to vote on that motion. I know that
Yes.
they may be up on the foreshore, but not everywhere, so I will call the question then on that motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And then Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Item number 14, which is on our screen here right now, just from the Orienteering Club to hold fall sessions on city property, and I'd make a motion that we do support that.
And second by Councillor Eliason. So anyone wish to speak to this? Just sounds like a great idea. So I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
Item number 16, which is and I don't actually, on my electronic version, it got a little garbled, so I just have to look at on the screen here. But it's a request for us to endorse the statement, I believe, and I'd so move.
Second.
Councillor Lavery moving that we endorse the statement, seconded by Councillor Eliason. Anyone else, anyone wish to speak to this? Councillor Wallace-Richmond speaking to the motion.
Thanks, Your Worship. This has also come up at the Shuswap Healthy Communities Coalition table, and most of the regional partners will be asked to endorse this very exciting forward-looking opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lavery?
Yes, and I'd also note, I think I got a quick glimpse at the UBCM policy recommendations and policy, and that there's a provincial initiative suggested in terms of active transportation, and this fits into what's being suggested and developing on the provincial scene, so I think it's a nice dovetail to that.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything further on this? And I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Did you have something further, Councillor Lavery?
And thank you. My last one, and maybe I need some explanation, a little bit more clarification first. Item number 18, which is a letter addressed to Mayor Cooper in terms of Area D and their request for a lot of support for ambulance service being located in the community. And I guess my first question through you, Your Worship, is whether that has been raised at the CSRD level, or what's the status of that?
So I would have to ask he did phone me about this, Renee Talbot did call me about this, and I'd have to ask our CSRD reps if has it come to the CSRD at all? Councillor Flynn?
I do not recall a specific request. I think this email might be the start of making a specific request and getting the support of surrounding communities. I don't know. My first question would be budget implications. I don't think there are any to any of the organizations involved, because it would be, I think, similar to that other position we talked about earlier, the outreach worker. So I see, from my point of view and from the community's point of view, a call out to Falkland from here is probably an ambulance that can't be serving our community for 3 hours. That's a public safety issue, and to me, I think we could support this, focusing on our concern about our area as well. But that's just my thoughts.
Councillor Jameson?
Thanks, Your Worship. That's an excellent point, actually. We wouldn't want increase in service in Falkland to come at the expense of service somewhere else. But knowing Falkland in that area fairly well, if there isn't ambulance service out there, that really is there's an obvious problem, especially in the summer. From Stampede days on, that is a really active area, and it's an outdoor area and a busy, well-traveled highway. I think it's something we could and should support.
But with the caveat that to Councillor Flynn.
Not at the reduction of service to other areas, no.
No, okay.
And I think, Your Worship, actually, this is something that comes up in other communities. There are other communities that feel they are not well served, and there's even suggestions that Salmon Arm's not well served sometimes. We've had letters to council here over the last couple of years.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Flynn? Okay. And so then, speaking to the motion, you've pretty much said everything that you needed to say. Did you want to have anything to say, Councillor Eliason, or anyone further? Okay, then I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And so, do you have someone else have something you'd like to speak to? Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I wasn't sure if anyone would raise item number 26. And I'm not raising it for us to support today necessarily, but it certainly is an issue that I think we need to think about. Through you to staff, I just wanted clarification. My understanding is that the provincial government has legislated that cities like ours can decide if we want we cannot decide about open field cannabis production, but we can decide about closed bunker style cannabis production on agricultural land within our city boundaries. And I'm not sure if staff knows the answer to that question or not, but I'll just try and see.
Development Services?
Well, Your Worship, it is kind of complicated, but first of all, the Agricultural Land Commission allows for the growing and cultivation of marijuana in the ALR. If a municipality or local government wants to get involved in trying to regulate that, whether it's building size, building location, and that type of thing, then we would need a specific farm bylaw under some section of the Local Government Act, which I can't think of off the top of my head, but it's something we don't have here in Salmon Arm. So it would be extra regulations than what we have now. But as it stands now, the growing and cultivation of cannabis is permitted in the ALR.
Okay, really appreciate that, and that's what my understanding was too. I'm not going to make any motion now, but I'm certainly putting my mind to, I feel like having large concrete buildings on agricultural land to grow cannabis is not what we want our agricultural lands to grow. and having some control over the size of those buildings might be something we should set our minds to. I'm wondering if referring it to our agricultural committee to perhaps do some research and get back to us, maybe that would be a good first step.
Okay. Would you like to do that?
Yes.
We'll refer it to our Agricultural Advisory Committee.
Have they spoken about this yet, Councillor Jameson?
Not
Sorry, I'd have to go, I'll go through everybody then. Councillor Jameson.
It's been part of the discussion, but it hasn't been an agenda item that we've made a recommendation on. And if I could just say, Mr. Pearson's comments about a farm bylaw is something that, again, has woven its way through discussions at the AAC for the past while. And I would suggest that it's something that should be discussed, certainly at the council level. And I will bring that up again as well at the at AAC. So your letter here, or pardon me, your suggestion, Councillor Harrison, would be a good one. We'll take that as an agenda item.
Okay, I appreciate that. As you know, we did regulate the size of buildings, houses on agricultural land, and I don't see this as being any different. So appreciate passing that on to that committee and look forward to hearing what they have to say.
Thank you. Did you have anything further then, Councillor Harrison?
No, thank you.
Does anyone have any further correspondence they would like to speak to? Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Cooper. I just have one more, and it's item number 12. And I'm wondering through you, Your Worship, if staff could just comment on the, it's a request for curb and gutter. I'm familiar with the area and the property, but if staff could comment on the concerns that the letter writer has put forward.
Director of Engineering.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we received a complaint in conjunction with one of the recent rainstorms. So there's gravel washing down the driveway. It's a steep driveway or steeper driveway on 9th, and that's located just adjacent to the new subdivision in Byersview. So it's a little offshoot of 9th. And I would recommend that this go to specific referral for consideration at budget.
So we can put that, we'll send that to a specific referral. Are you comfortable with that?
And that requires a motion at this stage, or just a notation just with staff?
No
Your
motion
Worship, just
required.
no motion required.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you have anything further, Councillor Lavery? No? Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Worship, and I know we're really dragging this out, but I find it interesting that there's almost 10 items on the correspondence that relate to traffic safety, transportation in one way, shape, or form. And I did want to thank our CAO for his very good and very well-written reply to a very well-written letter in previous correspondence from a Mr. Chalmers with regards to questions about the underpass. So I think this letter, for anybody who wants a quick summary of how the underpass is being funded and why we're borrowing and what we're using, this is a great letter. And as I said, is a very good reply to a good letter previously. So thank you to the CAO for writing that, and I think it is very informative for anybody who wants some light reading on the underpass. The next piece of correspondence is related to Highway 97, and I think we all know that we're concerned with the school reopening and that intersection, and I believe there has been a fatality or serious accident at that intersection in the last couple months. So I think that item 4 needs to be, I think we've done what we can and appreciate staff proacting on that. Item 9. I know we're all wondering, and this letter is thanking council and staff for keeping the Highway West improvements west of Salmon Arm in the media and in the forefront of everybody's thoughts. I think one of the things I want to ask staff to look into, I've had at least 5 people comment to me on the drive from Salmon Arm out to visit us at Sandy Point that they feel like they're on a old wagon road. I think that stretch of highway is in the highest level of disrepair it's ever been in, especially from the bridge kind of to just past the big corner. And I think it's being ignored because of the fact that it may have been being improved. So I agree with the letter writer that that dip is dangerous, but just as dangerous is the huge potholes that people are swerving around on that stretch of road up to the big corner and the straight stretch towards Sandy Point. So trying not to sound selfish here because I drive out to Sandy Point a fair bit, but having heard from people from other communities go, what is wrong with the Trans-Canada there? I think we need to keep it in focus that they can't stop doing highway improvements because we might get a project going forward. And I think that needs some paving, pothole filling, and this specific safety item referred to. So I'm not sure what that means with what we should do with the correspondence, but I just asked staff to maybe mention that to their ministry contacts. Drive that stretch of road is probably one of the worst now because I think it's being ignored in anticipation of future improvements. So I want to thank the people that have brought all the significant travel issues or transportation issues to the forefront, and sorry that I mentioned so many of them.
We need to mention them, and you will bring it to your contacts with Ministry of Transportation, Director of Engineering. So thank you for that. We appreciate it. Okay. Is there anything further that we wish to, Council wanted to address? Yeah, I think we've done pretty good coverage here, so. Okay. There's anything further? Seeing none.
Your Worship, there was item 10.2 and 10.3.
Okay, so we'll start 10.2, letter of support. And Councillor Wallace Richmond will make the motion. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Eliason. Anyone wish to speak to this? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And I was at the Theatre on the Edge and thoroughly enjoyed it. It was very well done. And also, the next one, Lanafit, use of Ross Street parking lot for the Roots and Blues outreach program, August 18th. And okay, so Councillor Harrison is making the motion, seconded by Councillor Eliason. Anyone wish to speak to this? Totally support it, absolutely. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Yes, and the motion is carried. And yes, we do totally support it, as you can see. And I want to acknowledge that Lana Fit from Economic Development is here. It's going to be a very exciting weekend. So thank you for the parts that you are taking in it. Okay. Administrator?
Your Worship, under staff reports, item 11.1 is the 5th Street Southeast sidewalk replacement. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Jameson, seconded by Councillor Flynn, that the 2018 budget be amended to reflect additional funding for the 5th Street Southeast Phase 2 sidewalk project in the amount of $15,000 reallocated from the unexpected reserve, and that funding from the reserve for the 8th Avenue Southeast road widening project be reduced by $15,000.
Okay. Director of Engineering.
Thank you, Your Worship. So essentially, this is an approved budget to repair the sidewalk between 8th and 10th up on 5th Street, just south of City Hall. And we've done some calculations based on the actual cost of concrete and whatnot, and we found that in order to proceed, we're going to potentially be $15,000 short in the project. So we're just taking a proactive approach to this to make sure that we can continue on with the project.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
Your Worship, item 11.2 is disposal of surplus equipment. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Wallace Richmond, seconded by Councillor Harrison, that the following bids be accepted for the sale of surplus equipment on a where-is, as-is basis: 1992 Ford F-250, 583021 BC Limited, $856.20. 2000 Chevrolet half-ton, 583021 BC Limited, $1,087.20. And 2004 Chevrolet half-ton, 583021 BC Limited, $1,058.20.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor Jameson?
Thanks, Your Worship. I see we don't get a lot of money for our old fleet items. Perhaps through Your Worship to Mr. Neuenhausen, so it's just advertised and whoever thinks they have an interest, can these vehicles be driven off the lot?
Your Worship, some of the vehicles are obviously in driving conditions. They go through an inspection from our mechanics, but the actual process was done by the finance department.
Okay, and so they're not in great demand, I take it?
No, Your Worship.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Your Worship.
I think he's jealous because it's newer than his.
No, well, we're getting close.
Just giving you a hard time. Sorry. Anyone have any further questions? Any comments? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
Your Worship, item 11.3 is replacement of unit number 69 flusher vacuum truck. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Lavery, seconded by Councillor Eliason, that Council approve the purchase of the unit number 69 flusher vacuum truck replacement from Kendrick Rocker Equipment for the quoted amount of $407,685 plus taxes.
Public Works?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is to replace the existing 2007 Volvo flusher truck, which is used by utilities for many purposes. It's been found to be a very invaluable piece of equipment for our staff. Bids were put out on BC Bid as well as on City's Salmon Arm website, and 3 companies quoted. As you can see by the results, we had some different options and some different consistent specs, but different options for the suppliers. We feel that this is the best option for what we need and for our operations, and it's also serviceable within the community.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flynn?
Just a question related to this and the previous item. Since we got so much for that other old equipment, what happens to the old flusher? Is it run its life course, nobody wants to buy it, or do we keep it and what happens?
Your Worship, with these bids, we did ask for the companies to supply a purchase price or a trade-in value for these units, and the trade-in we're getting is approximately $105,000.
Okay. So that's part of the final prices.
Part of the final price.
Okay. And we'll throw that $2,000 from the other item towards this.
Councillor Eliason?
Stay on council long enough, you get to buy your second vac truck. It's a pretty exciting day. I remember when we bought it, and I was like, oh, wow. I'm just excited to see if we ever get another grader.
Thank you. Do we have anything further? I'll call the question. Oh, sorry. Councillor Harrison?
Thank you, Worship. Just 2 comments. First of all, I appreciate staff's work on this in the report. The fact it can be repaired locally if needed at the repair shop under warranty is great. And I think sometimes in the community people think, wow, they're spending $400,000 on a flusher vacuum truck. That sounds like a lot of money. But it's important that they know this has been planned out. And that, when people talk about reserves, they sometimes think, why are they putting money in reserves? This is why. So that when we need to buy a flusher truck, we have the money. And what will happen after we buy this one, we'll start putting money in reserves for the next one. So it's good that we have multiple bids, and so we know that the price is about probably what it should be. So I'll certainly support the motion.
Thank you. So what you're saying is it's basically like your own savings accounts where you have to save up for budgeted items that you may need in the future. And so it's very similar here at the city. We do save up for individual items. We put the money in reserves, and when we have the money to spend, then we can move forward with this. So thank you to staff for all your work on this. So I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
Your Worship, the next item, 11.4, is budget amendment and project award for the airport tree topping program. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Harrison, seconded by Councillor Jameson, that the 2018 budget be amended to reflect additional funding for the Shuswap Regional Airport's tree encroachment maintenance in the amount of $270,000 reallocated from the airport major maintenance reserve, and that council award the Shuswap Regional Airport tree topping project to Bartlett Tree Experts in accordance with the terms of their quote, in the amount of $161,020 plus taxes with a completion deadline of November 1st, 2018.
Director of Engineering.
Thank you, Worship. So as you're aware, the Salmon Arm Regional Airport received an inspection from Transport Canada, and they found that some of the trees on the north and south approach, the runway, were encroaching into the flight path. And in 2017, we had already started negotiating with the Salmon Arm Golf Course in order to deal with that section of trees. However, there's a lot on cities, or some city property and private property that we have to top. We spent about $30,000 last year topping some of the trees on the north end. It's very onerous work. They actually have to climb each tree, top it, and then clean up their mess in the bottom. And so, Your Worship, if I can get the administrator to put my screen on, I'll be able to show a map and just give you a better understanding of the extent of the work. So hopefully you can see the different colors here. This is the airport here. These are the airport buildings, and the runway is this line right here. And then there's different sections. This is the Salmon Arm Golf Course area. I'll just zoom in here. So in 2017, the city funded $50,000 for tree removal. It was decided that the removal of the trees in the golf course would be a better option rather than going back to them every 5 to 10 years. What we're planning on doing, we put it out an RFP for the cleanup and topping of the area on the north end of the runway. And we had spent $30,000, but that was curtailed a little bit because of the forest fire seasons last year. So we're looking at doing it probably starting September and moving along. And then we also have on the south end a bit more remaining. Oops, if I can get this to work for me here. An area which we do not have right-of-ways over at the present time, but we need to remove the trees in this general area as well. These have not been costed out in this particular RFP, but we've taken a general area of the trees because we don't have an agreement to go onto the property to survey them yet, but we intend to use the pricing that we've received now, and we've put an estimate on that to remove those trees as well. So that's why we're taking out the full amount in the budget to see if we can continue on. So one thing that the low bidder has suggested is that if we can extend the completion date, they would give us a bit of a rebate, $10,000, and that would give us also some time to negotiate right-of-ways and have the areas surveyed. So we're looking to award to Barrett Tree Experts to do the north end, and then we'll continue on with the removal, if we can, on the south end. And this will allow us, once these are complete, it will allow us to confirm that there are no encroachments and turn on the lights back at the airport for evening flights.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor James, I'm going to let Councillor Harrison speak first, since this is he's the airport our committee person, chair. So I'm going to, Councillor Harrison.
You okay with that, Councillor Jameson? All right, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank staff for all the work they've done on the airport. When I became the airport committee chairperson and representative of council, I didn't think I'd spend so much time learning about trees, but it has been challenging for the city, I think. And I think out in the community, people are saying, why don't you just cut the trees down? And the directors answered that question, I think, in as easy a way as possible. I think we all want to get the airport accessible at night as quickly as we can, and that's certainly what the Airport Commission's working on. The north, maybe we'll talk about the north end first. So by passing this motion, we're going to ensure that the trees at the north end are low enough so that that will be looked after. The south end, this part of the motion, the 65,000 is, there's 5 properties there. And we need right-of-ways over some of them. And so 65,000 is to ensure that we get that. And then the 100,000 is to remove or top the trees at least from there. One of the challenges, of course, is if when you top trees, they just grow faster. And so this has been like a project that happens every 10 years approximately. So appreciate the golf course's cooperation. That won't happen there because we were able to cut those down low. And at least one of the owners on the north end has agreed to let us cut a lower there as well. I wonder if we could just have that other map that shows the elevation. I know it's outdated just a touch, but it gives, I think it'll give council and the gallery a little bit of an idea about what this looks like. The red zone on the south, if we look at the south end first, so you're not allowed to have any trees in that area. This map is, how old is this map about?
Your Worship, these jagged lines here are actually from the LiDAR, which we flew in 2010. So it's already 8 years old. And these represent the heights of the trees. And we've actually got another map. I don't have it with me, unfortunately, but it predicts where actually we flew it again in 2017, and it shows that the trees are well within these areas here.
Yep.
So there is some topping to be done.
I've seen that map, and that's the problem, is that in 8 years, those trees in 2010 that were below are now in that range. And so Transport Canada has a NOTAM on, which means you can't fly at night because there's trees in that zone. So we're doing our very best to remove them, and I know that council and the community wants to get that done, especially for the medevac. I can assure them that we're working as diligently as we can, and I encourage council to pass this motion because it will help us get that work done.
Thank you. Did you want to push your button, Councillor Jameson? Councillor Jameson?
Thanks, Your Worship, and really, the explanation from the two people has been really good. I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any further questions or comments? I just have a comment that I'm happy to see this moving forward. I had received emails about medevacs and the need for the trees to be trimmed and the lights to be turned on, and so I really appreciate that this is coming forward and fully supported. So I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
Your Worship, item 11.5 is ALC application 376 for the property at 1471 50th Street Southwest. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Flynn, seconded by Councillor Harrison, that application ALC 376 be authorized for submission to the Agricultural Land Commission.
Okay. Development Services?
Thanks, Your Worship. If I can get my screen up on the projector. The property is located in the Salmon Valley area on 50th Street Southwest, and it also fronts Christensen Road at the northwest corner of the property. And the owner is Daryl and Arlene McLeod, and they would like to construct a dwelling more or less in the middle of the property. There's a covenant on the western portion of the property, and the covenant was required by the Agricultural Land Commission when the property was subdivided in 2006. And the covenant says if a house is to be built on this property, it has to be built within the red boundary. And the applicant is requesting to have that covenant amended so that a house could be built here on an area no greater than 20 meters by 20 meters, 400 square meters, which is less than the maximum house size allowed by our zoning bylaw. And staff support the proposal. It's the Agricultural Land Commission who would make the decision whether to approve it or not if council supports this proposal.
Thank you. As I understand it, there is a road requirement, so if it had to go all the way to the road would have to go from 50th Street all the way back to that piece that is where the covenant is?
The driveway off of 50th Street going westward goes up the north side of the property to about where the barn is. And if a house was to be built where the Agricultural Land Commission wants it to be built, the driveway would have to be extended through the field to this area. And this area is really quite steep. It's over 30% slope. And there's a covenant put on by the city saying you cannot access this portion of the property from Christensen Road because it's too steep and it's dangerous for an access.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. We had a good discussion at planning about this, and Mr. Johnson's out there. Mr. Johnson explained pretty well, I thought, to us. So I would like to propose the same amendment that I proposed at the Planning Department, which would say, Council recommends that the Agricultural Land Commission conduct a site visit of the property in order to consider all elements of the application.
Seconded by Councillor Eliason.
And just very briefly, as we did talk at planning about that same amendment, you can't really get a feel of the land unless you go out there. And so your point about the driveway is important for them to understand, and also the steepness of that slope on the backside as far as both building site and trying to access it. So we encourage them by this amendment to come and visit the site.
Okay. So anyone wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Jameson?
No, it's a good one.
Okay. Councillor Flynn?
I will support the amendment. I wanted to ask some other questions, so I'll just wait my turn.
So then I will call the question then on the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And then if you want to, Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Worship. And my question is kind of threefold with regards to the motion. I support the motion. I just question whether when we send it, do we send it with clear notice that we cannot approve a road off of that road or a driveway because of the slope, the dangerous access, all of those things? Do we make it really clear that really the only alternative for access to that piece of property is the current driveway plus double that in land through agricultural land? Will we make it clear that we will not support an access off of the road?
Development Services?
If the Agricultural Land Commission reads the staff report and if they look at the title, they may take that in consideration.
Okay. So we don't, there's no value in putting it in a motion or in part of the motion. You're just hoping they read your staff report and accept that.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll look at it or not, but.
And refresh my memory, and it's probably in the report, but the Agricultural Advisory Committee saw this and supported it. So should that be in our motion? Because we have an Agriculture Advisory Committee. Should we be mentioning their support or just including their minutes to say they supported it? Through you, Your Worship.
Yeah. Development Services?
Your Worship, the Agricultural Land Commission requests the resolution and the minutes from the Agricultural Advisory Committee is something they look for.
Okay.
So they do look at that.
Okay. And then I guess my last question, and I can't do the math in my head, but my guess is doubling the length of that driveway and using up that extra agricultural land is quite a bit more than the 20 by 20 being requested. Is my math that I've done geospatially, which I'm terrible at, accurate?
It looks like it would be greater than the area requested.
So does that go in our motion or is that in the applicant's?
I don't know if the applicant actually addressed that in their letter specifically.
They're nodding their heads, so I'll take that as a yes. I find that this is one that is easy to support because AAC's on side, it makes sense. You can't access that piece of property from where they want us to. So I'm very much in support. I just want to make sure, because we believe this and because staff is in support and the AAC is in support, we make it very clear to the ALC that we are in support in as many ways as we can.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Eliason?
Yeah, I'll vote to support it, but I don't think you got a shot. It's true.
Ready? Do we have anything further from council? Okay, hearing none, then I will call the question on the motion as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Administrator?
Your worship, the next item, 11.6, is the British Columbia Air Access Program. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Harrison, seconded by Councillor Wallace Richmond, that council authorize staff to execute the BC Air Access Program conditional grant agreement to accept funding to a maximum of $520,000 or 50% of the total eligible project cost for the construction of Taxiway Charlie.
Director of Engineering?
Thank you, Worship. So as stated in the report, back in 2015 and 16, we applied for a grant. We applied 2 grants, one for the new fuel facility at the airport and the other for the construction of phase 1 of Taxiway Charlie. At that time, the fuel facility was granted and the Taxiway Charlie was not successful. We were approached this year by BC Air Access Grant, and they indicated that they had reviewed some of the previous applications and they felt that ours was worth funding. And so they have now made the announcement that we were successful and we will be getting 50% of the eligible costs for the construction of phase 1 of Taxiway Charlie. So this is a bit of a blessing. Unfortunately, now we've got a bit of hoops to jump through in order to get the remainder of the funding because we have to come up with the other $520,000. So we do have the agreement. We need to have that signed. And then we will be doing a cost estimate for the proposed estimated cost for that construction. And then we will most likely have to go to an AAP to secure the borrowing for that amount. But this is requesting that we proceed with the first step, which is signing the agreement.
Okay, thank you. And as our airport rep, oops, sorry, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Worship.
Sorry, go ahead and push the button again. It's like, yeah.
Thank you, Worship. Just through you to staff, do we have the map of the master plan showing this section?
Yes, Worship.
I think most of council probably is aware. I think most of the members of council were actually at the meeting when we talked to then Minister Todd Stone at the UBCM asking for this grant. But Taxiway Charlie, that's better. There we go. If you can take the hand there.
Yeah.
There's Taxiway Charlie. Presently, the taxiway is the diagonal piece, that piece right there. And the problem with that taxiway is it takes up all the space where we want to put the hangars. Those are hangars there. And this is a picture of the master plan. So by moving the taxiway there, we can access the fuel, we can access those new hangars and the airstrip part way down, which is key in the development of our airport. As Director discussed, today's motion is just to acknowledge and accept the grant of over $500,000. And then when the time comes for us to come up with the other half, I think it is important for council to know that probably it would be an AAP process at that time, but that won't be well into next year, I would think. So I would ask for council support. It should be an easy one. Accepting $500,000 is simple. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jameson?
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, and I will support the motion. And just a couple of questions through Your Worship. So were we added to the list of grants, the existing list, or were we added after others were dropped from the list? Or do we know that information?
Your Worship, we're not sure, but it was very nice that they kept us on the list.
Yeah, well, that's, I guess, a testament to the fact that the funding application was well done, and they usually are. So, yeah, good for us, and especially good for staff for getting that together and being patient with it. So Your Worship, we've exhausted reserves. That there's no reserve money available.
Director of Engineering?
Your worship, this is a capital expenditure, so we don't have a capital reserve for this particular construction.
Okay, so the alternative process will kick in then, okay, if we go ahead with it. And it's sort of an example of how it's a mixed blessing. Now it kind of skews the budgeting process, and so we have to borrow $500,000. But it's worth it. We have to do it. Let's go.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Flynn?
Well, I'm not gonna turn down $520,000, although Councillor Harrison would be one asking, do we have to come up with matching? And he knows that we do. I guess my question, was the application for the funding done by the city of Salmon Arm, or was it done by the regional district?
Your worship, the airport is managed by the city, and the funding application was done by the city.
So the fact that it's called the Shuswap Regional Airport, does that mean our regional partners help fund it, or do they leave all the funding to us and just call it a Shuswap Regional Airport?
Your worship, it's funded 50% operationally.
That's all. So capital. That seems very convoluted and doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but that's something I guess I have to take to another table. And so the AAP would be the cities, not the regional districts, at this point.
That's correct, your worship.
Would it affect our grant if the funding came for capital from more than just the city, or does the city have to provide their 520?
The city ultimately has to provide the money. Where they get it from, I'm sure
Okay.
it's not an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Cooper. This is absolutely great news. I think we all know that. It's a head nodder for that. A few items ago, we talked a little bit about the prudent and really solid financial footing of the city through reserve funds, through budget positioning. I think this is another example of that, of positioning through application, and this is just great news. I'm going to make a little editorial comment here. I think that there are others who view improving the airport as a vision to move forward. There actually are visions in place, and they're called master plans. And this is a master plan that has been in the works, that has been positioned in the works. $520,000, we have to get a matching grant from it, but actually that's equivalent to over 3% taxes. We talked a little while ago about getting a pumper truck at $500,000, or excuse me, $407,000 plus taxes. That's 2.5% taxes. We've just purchased a fire truck a while ago at $500,000. Which is a significant amount as well. So it's vision for the future for sure. It's part of our master plan, and I want to thank staff and actually this table here for moving forwards and ensuring a future for this airport. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eliason?
That master plan started in the wee years of 2005. So these master plans do come around, and they do work in the long term. So we've been saving and budgeting for all of these things, and it's good to see that we're doing the fuel. As you saw in the thing, we've improved the gates. We've done this. We've done that. Changed this. So I'd like to thank Councillor Harrison and staff for their work to continue working forward to get this grant. Happy to see it come about, and happy to see the airport moving forward. A lot of money being spent on the airport today, but it's a very important regional facility, and it wouldn't happen without, like I say, without Councillor Harrison and without the Director of Engineering making these things happen. So good work.
Thank you. Do we have anything further? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Administrator?
Your worship, item 13 is council statements.
Councillor statements. Councillor Jameson?
Thanks, Your Worship. And so I'll be repeating hopefully a brief report about what was said last week at planning. And I'm going to keep the first part really short because I see Lana has left, but I did manage to take in 2 of the 3 coffee with council meetings that we had, and because I've been doing this thing called working and teaching, I was never able to attend very many of them, and so the summer has been really good to be able to attend 2 of the 3, And the other one that I did not attend, I have toured that facility before, and I know Mike, and I've talked to him, so that was good. So I'll get right to the wildfire protection planning that I know it's in the news. It's big talk around town. It's big talk in almost every community in BC, and it's really, really hard to not talk about it when you watch the news and listen to the radio, and you go out and you breathe the smoke. So it's something that's on everybody's mind. And so I just wanted to, I'll just go over briefly what I have done and with your support, Mayor Cooper. And we've met with Nesconlith Indian Band, and I've had a couple of other meetings with members of a member of the band and a local forester, Terry Smith, and met with staff. I thank staff for providing maps and some of the expertise that comes along with our senior staff. It's really valuable. Originally, there was a suggestion when Louis Thomas came to council that we co-apply for funding and develop a wildfire plan. And even now, it sounds like a good idea. It might not be the best idea, though. And so I'm suggesting that after Ms. Jackson's made inquiries into with the ministry, that we follow a plan that will have us apply independently, but certainly reference and overlap wherever we can with NIB. And it doesn't preclude us actually hiring NIB members if they're well trained and it fits into a plan that we create. But after the meetings, it became clear that we don't really know what the program will look like. And so that's going to happen in probably September. I think we can anticipate some announcements at UBCM. And so at this time, there's no application process. So we'll look forward to that announcement. So the ministry's advice at this time is to wait for a full announcement, be ready to apply, and do so as a separate application from other jurisdictions, whether it be regional districts or Indian bands. But have a common focus. And one thing I really appreciated was the comments from staff when we had our meeting about community assets and having a map that was available. And Mr. Neuenhausen's comments were really valuable about protecting water and water assets and the delivery of water and reservoirs. And I guess added to that, although it wasn't mentioned at the meeting, I guess we should also consider road access in and out of the community, and of course our protection services too, like police and fire and ambulance and hospital, and so it's a big chore. I've heard the term from council members, our RAPATAC representatives that came and met with us, and of course senior staff. It's overwhelming. The cost would be overwhelming to clean up every bit of Salmon Arms forested area that's at risk. It could be done, but it couldn't be done cheaply, and it couldn't be done in 1 year. One article that I think Councillor Lavery sent on to us from Cranbrook suggests Cranbrook, $28 million would be the cost to do the risk management in their community. $28 million is Salmon Arms' budget, or close to it. So we have to look at this realistically. Any plan that we come up with, it has to be community-wide support. This isn't the city of Salmon Arm going out and cleaning up everything. It just couldn't happen. So we're going to have to enlist community support. We're going to have to rely on people to clean up their yards. And I think we are going to have to provide some in-kind service where we can dispose of that waste. I think we're going to have to, it's a bigger discussion, and we do need provincial support. There's no doubt about it. And so this fall when the UBCM meets, hopefully, I won't be attending UBCM this year, but I know those of you that will, you have your keen ears set to the mics around the convention. And so please make sure that we get those, that information and we use it immediately. And so I really think we need to, upon the release by the provincial government, we need to have the city of Salmon Arm prepared to make an application. It's going to have to be quick off the mark, and that'll address the risks and the management of interface fires. So that's really my report. when you look at like, it's actually a lot of discussion and quite a few meetings to suggest that we do nothing. And it's kind of a weird feeling. But we have to be off the mark in September when it's announced.
Okay. So thank you for your report, and yes, I was in on the meetings and right from the beginning with the presentation from the Nesconlith Councillor Louis Thomas and Terry Smith from as well, and they talked about doing joint applications and working together on it, and I think we were all excited about that opportunity. But after our corporate officer spoke to the, as you had said, the UBCM program, the person in charge of that program, she found some changes had been made and that there would be different pots of funding for municipal governments and First Nations, and that they could apply separately but reference each other. So we appreciated all your work on that, and we were told we should hear about the programs and what would be required and what would be needed in the applications at the UBCM. So we'll certainly be looking for that. And like you say, we need to be early off the mark. I know that the CSRD does have free disposal of yard waste. So anybody that cleans up their yard, and they shouldn't just hold on to it waiting. They should take it to the CSRD right away. There's no reason to hold on to it because it's free every day. People used to wait for free dump days or free yard waste days at the CSRD at landfill here in Salmon Arm, but now it's free every day. So for people like us, we don't wait anymore. We just take them up there. So just hopefully people will also think about that. We have 5 big trees at least in our yard. Even more with maples that in the fall there's lots of leaves, but we clean up those every year, and every year we take at least 2 to 3 pickup loads to the CSRD landfill for that. So really appreciate what the CSRD is doing, and we'll look forward to hearing about the funding announcements for wildfire protection plans at the Union of BC Municipalities Convention. And Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Cooper, and thanks, Councillor Jameson, for the update. I think it's great and reassuring to know that we are just positioned for whatever's going to come forward. And we're sort of in this period between the old system and the new one coming in, and I find that reassuring, so thank you very much for that. It's really interesting with under the old system, there was a component of Fire Smart and Fire Smart education as well. Some of the, I think, or I'm hearing some of the early signs of what might be in September are, will be emphasizing more Fire Smart education. And again, just looking the other night at the UBCM resolutions, there's a call for a provincial control and funding of Fire Smart education within all communities throughout the province. So I think that we're on the right track with that. It's a huge complex problem, and I appreciate the update. Thank you.
Councillor Jameson?
I think I should add that I think it's important that residents aren't under the illusion that the city of Salmon Arm is going to clean up every piece of private property in town. That our focus has to be on public assets. It'll have to be on our water, our sewer, our roads, our fire protection, our police protection. It has to be so that those services can be provided. We have over 7,000 properties in Salmon Arm, and to service every one of them is, again, it's just not possible. So we have great site-specific protection. When there's a fire somewhere, our firefighters are there and they do a good job. It'll be a little different. It's different in other communities, of course, where those interfaces are happening, and we experienced it here 20 years ago. It changes the whole dynamics of firefighting, and so we want to make sure that that citizens are educated, we're educated, and they're engaged in looking after their properties and helping their neighbors with their properties. I think that has to be one of the focuses of any plan that we come up with.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anything further? Okay, hearing none. Administrator?
Your Worship, item 14 is the CSRD update.
Did one of our reps wish to speak to this? It's the last meeting, so.
I thought we did this update after the last CSRD meeting.
Yeah, you keep messing that up by not waiting for this, so.
Oh, yeah, I updated you guys last month on this, and the CSRD meeting is in 2 days, or 3 days, so you guys wanna talk about it? Anything that I missed, or we missed?
Councillor Flynn?
I just think because we voted on that other motion and because this is now going to be part of future meetings, I think the best way for us to handle this is if there's something that comes out of the meeting that we think we need to speak to before the update comes, we as the reps will bring that forward. But otherwise, I think it's best use of all of our time if we wait for the summary and then just answer questions or highlight things in the summary. That being said, I don't think we need to wait 3 weeks to talk about CSRD if there's an important issue that needs to be brought forward. So I think you handled it very well in advance. I missed the last meeting, so I wasn't going to report on it.
Thank you. Councillor Eliason?
Yeah, let me just check the schedule. I just want to make sure that I'm not on crack when I do these things. Calendar. What day was this? The CSRD was on the 16th of, no, it was on the 19th. So it was on the 19th. I believe I reported on it on the 23rd. It's now 2 weeks later. I think reporting on it immediately after the meeting is probably my most effective way to get information out, but if you want me to wait, I can wait.
We'll talk about it.
Thank you. We'll talk about it. All right. Do we have any administrator? We can move on.
Your worship, item 16 is deferred items, and this pertains to the transit passes for refugee families.
Did we have a cost on that? I think that's one of the things that we're looking for. Chief Financial Officer?
Does that work? Your worship, the estimated cost for the remaining 5-month period of 2018 is about $1,200 for the entire family.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll leave this up to council. Do we want to move forward with this? Or corporate officer, did you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Your Worship. I did have the opportunity to speak to Richard Curry, and he said that he initiated this request because he was speaking to a Rotary member who advised that previous refugee families had benefited from transit passes. They are not affiliated with the Rotary specifically, this family. It's a private sponsorship with 3 families in our community sponsoring the Masafa family. And he did say they are connected to settlement services, but the request wasn't actually initiated through settlement services.
Do we have anything further from council? Councillor Jameson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Did we want a specific request from an organization, or do we feel comfortable supporting a request from private citizens? It's a question to council. If we want to go through official channels with the Settlement Society, I'm fine with that.
What is the will of council?
The family is in town now.
Yes. You want to give them bus passes? Did you want to make that a motion?
Oh, yeah, it's. No one wants to answer it, so that's no problem.
Your worship, so there is a motion on the floor which was deferred from the last meeting.
Right. Council approve in principle are granting transit passes to the Musasa family for 1 year depending on pending determination of the cost in collaboration with the Rotary Club and/or Immigrant Services.
Yes, and we have that cost now.
Yes, and the cost is $1,200 for the remainder of this year. Is that correct? Yes.
Your Worship, one alternative could be that Richard Curry would administer the passes. So the family would not come in and collect their own passes. Richard Curry would keep track of everything and make sure that the individuals who were allotted the passes would receive them. And I think that's what happened with the Rotary in the past, is there was one contact person and everything went through that individual.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace Richmond?
Thanks, Your Worship. Could we, it's just a procedural question. Could we modify the motion to say up to?
$1,200?
Yeah, and, because it's summertime, kids are free, you know,
So we modify the motion or amend the motion to say up to $1,200? Is that the amendment you would like to see?
yes. Can we amend a deferred motion is the
Yes.
procedural question, okay.
Yes.
Who made it? Could it be a friendly amendment, or?
I'll accept that as a
Okay.
friendly amendment.
Okay. So the motion was moved by Councillor Jameson, seconded by Councillor Eliason, and then deferred by Eliason and Flynn. But so would it be for a friendly amendment to it?
accept it as friendly as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Jameson and Councillor Eliason accepted as friendly, up to $1,200. Does anyone wish to speak to that? Councillor Harrison, to the
No,
amendment?
no, fine.
Okay. Councillor Lowry, did you wish to speak to the amendment?
I'll speak in favor of the amendment. I think that it's certainly much cleaner when it's a sponsoring organization coming through, and I think that I just want to mention that at this stage here right now, but at this, I do know some of the parties involved, and I think they're reliable. I'm prepared to look at this as a one-off, but I think when requests come in again, I think that we need to be asking for a sponsoring organization. So I'd be prepared to do this and for the remainder of the year 2018.
Okay. Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, I mean, it's semantics, but I think it's important that we have a sponsoring agency, and I'm not sure why Settlement Services, I don't know if the motion can include upon approval by Settlement Services or upon support. But even if it was the Social Issues or Impact Committee, never remember what the name is, that Social Advisory Committee that brought it forward, I could support it. I'm just struggling with the precedent being set by a request from somebody in the community and whether this is the right way to be dealing with these moving forward. So not against the $1,200, just worried about process.
Thank you. Good points. Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I agree with Councillor Lavery, and I just want to clarify, because the motion says for 1 year. So are we talking about like September 1st to September 1st for the $1,200? Or are we talking about September 1st to January 1st?
Services?
Your Worship, the $1,200 would cover for the remainder of 2018 only. If council wishes to cover any part of 2019, then that would be dealt with through the budget.
Okay, no, that would be my intention. I just wanted to make sure I understood the motion. So it's actually for the remainder of this year. That motion's not that clear showing that, so we might want to just clean that up.
Okay. So we want to make sure that reflects that it's for the remainder of this year, 2018. Okay. Councillor Wallace Richmond?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Again, I think the up to is important because many of these, the younger children will be riding for free, possibly going to school, maybe not even need a bus pass. I think in this case it is a private citizen because this is a special sponsorship program by private citizens, and in the last case, Rotary took on a private sponsorship. So in this case, it's a group taking on a private sponsorship. They're just not affiliated to Rotary. So in a way, it's the same as it was before, but moving forward, if this comes up again, I would like to see it have a more formal process through Immigrant Services. Maybe it's a budget referral. There's so much every year, and we don't have to go through all the kind of machinations of this.
Thank you, I agree. Do we have anything further? So can you just read the motion for us?
Your Worship, it's that council approve in principle granting transit passes to the Musa family for 1 year, for 1 year up to a maximum of $1,200 for the remainder of 2018 only.
Okay. Okay, so do we need to have for 1 year, or should it just be up to? Or
Up to $1,200 when it's, if they.
Until December 31st.
until December 31st, okay. Is there anything further on this then? I'm sorry. Councillor Jameson, did you have anything further?
Yes, Your Worship. I think we're all trying to do the same thing here.
Yes.
We want to provide free passes for a new family in Salmon Arm. I think we're all going in that direction. I'm honestly a little confused as to the amount of money, the length of time, and to be, again, really honest, $1,200 seems like a lot of money for passes that will expire at the end of the year. Maybe I'm. So anyway, I'm just saying that, and in that, is there a way that we can give 1 year, and if it exceeds $1,200, well, I guess we can't. However, $1,200 does seem to me to be a lot of money, because I know that some of the children will not cost anything. So anyway, any other comments on this? I think we all want to do the same thing.
For $1,200. We will
Just
up
see
to-
how far it goes.
Yeah. Are we all okay with that?
How much is a flusher truck?
You know, I've got my final question.
Thanks, Your Worship.
Councillor Lyson, this isn't about $400,000 versus $1,200. It's about having a process, and Councillor Jameson is right. We are all in support. It's just the machinations and how we deal with it. Personally, I'm not comfortable with a person in the community coming to us and asking for money on their own. It should be through an organization. So I think we need to have the discussion, and don't compare it to a flusher truck, because that's offensive. So anyway, I will vote in support of the motion, but the motion is worded incorrectly because it refers to the Musa family, and Musa is his first name. I don't know the last name. But Musa, his wife, and 6 children will be arriving here, so I think we should probably have the proper last name, or say that Musa is a first name, not a last name. So I want to make sure the motion is correct, and I'm not comfortable not having a process in the future, but I will vote in support of it today. And I don't want to minimize the fact there's been no proper process.
Okay. Thank you very much, appreciate it. Councillor, okay. So that council approve in principle granting transit passes to Musa and his family up to $1,200. Is that what we're looking at? Councillor Lyson.
Councillor Flynn.
Let's not start.
Through the chair, why do you think this motion was deferred in the first place? To give us some time to figure this out, and it's still not figured out. We should vote this down and be done with it. I moved the deferral for that reason, and we still can't figure it out. Then we talk about it for 20 minutes because we haven't figured it out. We're not doing our job at this table if that's the case. Let's be honest.
So the motion on Councillor Jameson?
Oh, no, let's make sure we're clear on money and clear on time, and then vote on it.
Okay.
That's all I'm after.
Good.
And
$1,200.
$1,200 we're clear on, Your Worship?
Yes.
And for 1 year, and it's going to end after 1 year, we're going to spend $1,200. When that $1,200 is gone or spent on tickets, that's our contribution ends. That's all I'm asking.
Okay. And so what I have is that for $1,200, up to $1,200 to end the December 31st, 2018. Is that correct? Chief Financial Officer?
Thank you, Your Worship. I can provide some background on the cost of the tickets. I did factor in the kids ride free through the summer. The costs are for monthly transit passes based on the ages of the family. So $1,200 would be inclusive of that ride free. Their smallest child is actually quite young, so with an adult they ride free through the whole year. And so I had a suggested motion, I don't know if that's the appropriate process, that council provide 2018 transit passes as needed for a 5-month period of August through December for the Algoni Musa family administered by Richard Curry to a maximum contribution of $1,200 funded from 2018 council initiatives, and that additional funding for the 7 months of 2019 be considered as a specific request for the 2019 budget.
I'll move that.
Moved by Councillor Jameson. And
We should
vote
defeat the motion
Okay.
that's on the
So
floor.
the current motion, I will call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion is defeated. And the new motion on the floor as read by our Chief Financial Officer.
Moved.
Moved by Councillor Jameson, second by Councillor Flynn. Is there any further comments? I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you, Chief Financial Officer. Administrator. Recess?
Yes, Your Worship, we recess until 7 p.m.
Thank you. I have somewhere I need to be. I will.